So last Sunday, I spoke at the UU, and the ongoing theme for the month's been curiosity. And, it's kind of a sparking curiosity speech. And where it led me to was we're obsessed with the endings of things, we're obsessed with finding the answer. But this was more about the journey and the question finding the answer. And through that, I came up with some interesting things. Like French philosopher Voltaire said, judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. And this was kind of the premise of the whole speech and the whole talk was finding this. And I came across some interesting topics. Like one of them was from Keats. After watching a Shakespeare play, he was writing a letter to his brothers, and he came up with a concept called negative capability. And negative capability was the ability to sit in not knowing. And Shakespeare stood that because, he wrote about thieves and murderers and poets and lovers, and there didn't have to be a finality or a right or wrong with them. They just were who they were. And he didn't necessarily have to close everything out. It was okay to have open-ended things in Shakespeare, and that was what stood out to Keats as a really strong point. And one of the things I recounted was, being a leader of software developers at Paramount, you see the best developers are really confident in their skills, but they're not arrogant about them. They know they're going to make mistakes, and when they do, they take responsibility for them, and they immediately, repair. And they are familiar with what they don't know. And the ones that aren't, they'll tell you how great they are. They'll try to do heroic acts of code. They'll go in and make mistakes and blame other people or situations or overworkness, and they don't really do that. And studying this stuff, I came across the Socratic method, and Socrates was probably the most famous man back then, and that was his method. Is he would find experts in a field and go up and talk to them and ask them about their process, and then start to question it. Not trying to be clever, but just to really dig in and be curious about it. And slowly, as he'd start to question it, the whole premise would start to fall away. And he realized that most people's knowledge was just one assumption built on another assumption built on another assumption, and didn't really stand on facts necessarily. And that people that were good in one narrow field would assume they're good at everything. And he came up with a concept that the people that knew the least were the most confident, because they really didn't know what they didn't know. And he said that's what the strength was, is that he was better than all of them because he knew how much he didn't know. And that led me to Darwin. And in his book, he talked about the same thing. He said that, the amateur naturalists were very dogmatic and very confident in their stuff, while the people that really knew what they were doing were open. And, his conclusion was that ignorance breeds confidence much more than competence does. Confidence more than competence does. And that was a big thing. I'd seen it in my own work, and here it was being, there. And then I came across Dunning and Kruger and the Dunning and Kruger effect, and they were two psychologists who recognized the same things. Let me find it actually here, because the way he actually described it, they described the Dunning-Kruger effect as a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or competence in a domain greatly overestimate their own knowledge or competence. They propose that incompetent individuals lack the metacognitive ability to recognize their own incompetence, often dubbed as a dual burden. And that was what pushed me, and I'll wrap this up, but that was what pushed me. And the metacognitive ability is that ability to have that watcher, to actually see your emotions and not let them control you. And, we kind of talked about how a lot of times we project our own weaknesses or our own insecurities on other people, fears. and how people often mirror back things. When we see somebody that really bugs us, it tends to, really trigger us. Then it's probably something that they're doing that we unconsciously do and don't like in our subconscious, and we're not aware of it. So that was one of the things we talked about, is actually looking at why you don't like somebody as a mirror into yourself of what you might have in your life that doesn't that you don't like about yourself, that you may not even know it. And that's where that metacognition comes in, is actually knowing your feelings and knowing yourself and being able to observe yourself without getting wrapped up and triggered and getting pulled into all these situations.
That's great. So good. Who wants to go first?
When I heard you, when you were talking about the Socratic method, that took me down a couple paths. Um, and oh, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, I read this book called Unlocking the Emotional Brain. And what it kind of helped me begin exploring was getting curious about our implicit beliefs, because it's our implicit beliefs, meaning the things that we don't even know we believe, but the things that really are underneath, the things that are the roots. And you were talking about Socratic method, and to some extent, I use a little bit of that. I think connected with some IFS parts work in exploring and kind of getting to know what people or what our parts believe, and then you kind of find one layer of a belief, and then okay, and where did that come from? And what I have learned to do is I ask kind of open-ended questions, right? And we'll come to some kind of a foundational belief, and I'll say, well, okay, and if that doesn't happen, then kind of these open questions that lead deeper into what is driving the different layers of protection, coming back down to what is the foundation, or who or what part is being protected or needing something, right? um, so when you're talking about Socratic method, that that's where that took me. So good, yeah.
And that's a question. I know my partner always talks about that, and I think it's the work. I'm looking it up. I think it's the work by Byron Katie.
Yeah.
Identity work starts with 4 questions. Like, if you have a belief, is that true? You look at it true. And then the second question is, can you absolutely know that's true? Like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, or is it there? How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And who would you be without that thought? And those 4 questions are like the root of Byron Katie's work to actually getting at those unconscious beliefs that you have in your system.
Two relatively young fish were swimming along, and they encountered an older fish. And the older fish said, "Good morning. How's the water?" And they kept moving along. And one of the fish turns to the other one and said, "What the hell is water?" And all of our assumptions, all of our beliefs, the foundational stuff, like Bob was talking about, we're swimming in it and not aware of it. Just, you think about how many cultural beliefs and biases we have, how many come from our families and it's just so ingrained. And it was my spiritual journey, starting as a very young person, always involved an intellectual journey as well. And it was in reading, and seeking. And yes, there was the mystical experience, the more direct spiritual, but there was always the study that went along with it. And the study, that approach led me to realizing at a certain point, relatively early on, I think, but just how little we know about anything, about everything. And then the really profound spiritual practice of actively not knowing. I think it was Dr. Peck, Scott Peck, sort of the father of the self-help revolution, said that when it comes to religion, mystery is at its heart, at its center. One type of person enters to solve the mystery, to get the answers, to say, this is it, we have it, we know it. The other goes to explore and live the mystery. And the practice of active not knowing, of knowing, the conclusion I came to was that every single thing that I believe, everything I think I know, is impartial, is inadequate, is some percentage wrong, some percentage. So the worst thing I could be would be confident or prideful or done with it. And to me, that's the biggest danger of knowing, is that we're done with it. When you know something, are you seeking? Are you searching? Are you studying? No, you know it. And so practicing not knowing is the spiritual journey that says, when it comes to the most profound aspects of life, of spirituality, of religion, of the psyche, of everything, we're not just talking about vague unknowns. We're talking about specific unknowables. And that requires humility. And ironically, it requires far more confidence than any other approach, because it takes a certain amount of security to be willing to say, I don't know. I
was
don't have
just
all the
thinking,
answers.
exchanging confidence for security.
Yeah.
Instead of calling it confidence. And I wonder, this is kind of out there, but like I wonder what the Latin root or the etymology of security versus confidence is.
Mm.
Because confidence, I think, is with faith, right? Fidelity, con is with, right, and fidence is fidelity, which I think is something related to faith.
Definitely the fidelity part and
Yeah,
the
and I'm not sure what secure would be, but I relate to secure to trust,
right.
which is different. It's just different.
And that the root word for faith is trust. It's not belief, it's trust. And that's what we were talking about. It is, I'm okay not knowing.
And
I'm okay not having all the answers.
confidence has a certain amount of knowing to it.
And I think it's probably more intellectual, probably more up here.
Yeah. And that takes me to and both what you and Jenny were just saying help remind me of this kind of idea of unlocking the emotional brain. And is it's okay, yeah, it's tuning into what I believe, but the answers are more in the visceral response, like asking the questions that help kind of catch the, like for this, this knowing, and I need to know. But if I don't know, then and what's the activation of not knowing?
Well, there's a quote I came across from author Rob Bell, and he said that doubt is not the opposite of faith, certainty is.
Yeah.
You don't leave things open for any possibilities for anything else.
Right.
And we're talking about confidence. I came across a term too called calibrated confidence, which was beliefs proportional to the evidence, but always open to revision, always keeping your ideas with an open hand.
I was thinking how much conflict could be resolved, both internally within ourselves, but also with one another if we are willing to question assumptions. So if you have an underlying assumption and that's the basis for your thought, then when you're presented with new information, it's through that lens that you see that new information, rather than if you're willing to question your assumptions and willing to continually gather evidence and see what evidence there's for or against. And I just think in some of the arguments we have, whether it's politics or what justice means, like where how to treat one another. Just think of conversations that you have with people where they are so firm in a particular belief or a particular opinion that any evidence you give them to the contrary, they're going to warp, to twist that. They're just so so attached to that opinion. And I think some of it is maybe not even so much a need to be right, but if you question that one assumption, then what else am I wrong about? And what else have what else do I need to question? Whereas if you, what was it? Jenny said calibrated confidence. Is that what it was? Yeah, to look at what evidence there is, but also be willing to consider new evidence. I think that I feel like it opens the door for so much in our life. Like I'm thinking of, for example, something like maybe as a younger person, if we attempted something like painting or music and it didn't go well, and then the assumption the rest of our life could be that, well, art's not my thing, music's not my thing. But later on, if we try it again, you've gathered new skills, you might have you'd be in a different frame of mind. And I think we limit ourselves in more than one way if we're not willing to be open and to question and to continually seek.
Jesus said that the way you even perceive these things is being childlike, is having an awareness of just being curious, open, delighted.
Yes.
And too often as we grow and as we harden our concepts and beliefs and we get, and the word that always comes to mind for me is defensive. If I'm certainty and defensiveness, the entrenched identity wars we're having, again, politics, religion, culture. Bob mentioned something about when the emotional brain or what you can tell what we believe, not by what we think or what we say, but how we react, how we respond. And so there's a lot of ways in life that we say certain things, but our bodies, our actions, where we're spending our time and our money and our efforts and that tells all. And approaching everything with openness, to me, is just the best way to live. Being humble. And there again, it's taking a step back. If I have a belief and my identity is tied to it, then I'm going to fight you for it. And we can go to war over it because yours is different from mine. And I've got to prove that mine is right and holy. But if there's some distance, some space, the space that all the great world traditions talk about, the Tao Te Ching, the master does his work and then he steps back. So there's a space. Meditation, why do you do it? To create a space between all these thoughts and where you really are. So the space allows us not to be. Here's a perfect example. Okay. I am going to do my best, my very best, with every novel I write. I'm going to pour into it. I study, I research, I try to remain open and get into a flow. And then I'm going to release it into the world. I'm going to do that step back. If you hate the novel, I'm okay with that. That's not meaning you hate me. I'm not going to be devastated. I have a certain belief about it. I have a certain experience with it. It's okay if yours is different. And that's, I think, what not knowing and not living with certainty gives us the space for that.
In IFS, they use the word unblended a lot. And unblended is when there's space between the different parts of us that have different beliefs or drives or fears, and we're able to create some perspective. So yeah, I'm a part of me is just sunk in and entrenched in one thing, but in another way, I got something totally different. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So I was telling you guys earlier, I was telling Michael that the consultation group that I've been a part of for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, we met today, and there was just a few of us. But we were processing something, or I was processing something, and they were kind of giving me some guidance and support and feedback. And of course, it was related to working with the client, but ultimately came back to me and my parts of my, and we're talking about, parts of me that are very caring towards my clients and wanting to take care of my clients. And what are I don't want to say the boundaries that I will cross, but there's a point at which caring can be not exactly hurtful, but not helpful. Anything in excess. So we were talking about this caring part, and then I was talking a little bit about this kind of chronic pain and inflammation and pressure that I've been dealing with for 5 or 6 years in my head. And a couple years ago, part of me just said, fuck it. And fuck it was leading the way for a while. And it is hard there are parts of me that want to manage fuck it, right? And today they were kind of holding up, well, what is the relationship between the part that says fuck it and the part that's caring? And is fuck it a way of caring for myself?
Mm-hmm.
And are there other ways of caring? And that moment, and I may not be explaining it too clearly here, but that moment just like it did this. And it gave me some clarity and some perspective that I had not had before about certain parts or beliefs that drive, that I have some awareness of, that I then act on. But if I have a better understanding of where they're coming from, I've got more choice and more understanding, empathy, compassion, as there's some unblending. So that was a path. But
Nice. I want to mention one other thing. Jasmine, you sort of touched on it. I've seen in a lot, I think this happens in every field. Jen, I'm sure it is in yours, and Jasmine and Bob, I'm sure y'all see this all the time, that you have what seems to be sort of revolutionary insights or advances. But each and every one are within a certain framework. So say you're Jungian, and so you're having, man, you wrote a book about it, but it's in the context. And in the religious world, I saw this so often where people, they have a sacred text, but then they have a whole framework to interpret that sacred text and then how the community functions. And so people will have insights or they'll have some fresh revelation, so called, but it's all in the context of the paradigm that they're all already in, which blinds us, which imprisons us to anything outside of that paradigm. That's why I feel as strongly as I do about anything, probably except love would only supersede it, is that we should question everything. Everything. And I have to question my framework, my paradigm, to even get to the point of, until I questioned my family dynamics, the until I questioned my culture and beliefs, the things as a kid I was taught that America means, who we are in the world, what the way I was told about our history versus seeing, I believe, a little more clearly now, and I hope by tomorrow and 10 years from now I'll be even more clear, is night and day. So when you talk about parts, Bob, if you want to get a part going, question something that's sacred. Question your family, question your country, question your faith. But that lets us know there's something there that's fighting for that certainty, that's fighting for that blindness. And I'm going to tell you what I think the part knows, some part of us knows. The moment you begin to question is the first step that ultimately leads out of Eden, that warm cocoon of knowledge and connection, and you can never go back. And once you know something, learn something, gain some kind of perception, insight, something, then all it does is open it up to learn something else, to grow, to experience. And you can never go back. And I think there's part of us that knows that there's only another step forward, another step. But it begins with questioning.
Deconstruction is the word that comes to my mind as I'm listening to you, and part of what we do in the therapeutic process or in the self-exploration process is deconstructing, Socratic, deconstructing our beliefs, and we begin deconstructing here, and then if we're open to it or able or available, we begin deconstructing lower, right?
I'll tell you what one of the biggest things for me, and it came up a little bit in this thing we're talking about, is this idea of paradox, that two things can be true.
Right.
And we don't believe that. And I mean, that's a big problem with politics, is because they don't believe like you hate them, and they're the same way. You don't believe like them, they hate you. And it's just driven this division. But when you can realize two things can be true at the same time, it's just based on how you've grown up, the things you've been implanted with, talking about family and religion and groups and social organizations. Like nothing is absolute truth. And until you can let go of that, you're always going to be controlled by something outside of you. And, when I started the speech on Sunday, I said, think about a question that you don't think you have an answer to, and whatever. And we let people talk at the end. And there was no really big questions, but one of the guys that was there brought up something called the 5-corner analysis, which I thought was really a cool way to look at things. And he said, basically, you take any argument or discussion between two people, and you look at it five different ways. One, I am right and you are wrong, and that's persuasion and dominance. Two, you are right and I am wrong. That's concession and learning. Number three, neither of us is wrong. Different perspectives, contextual truth. Four, both of us is wrong. Shared ignorance and need for new data. And number five was both of us are right. Synthesis and integration. And if you can really look at any situation that way and be honest with it, there's a real chance for growth out of that. And kind of what we're talking about, like none of them is going to be 100% right. It's just a different perspective, and learning to see that perspective and put yourself in other people's shoes and see why they might feel the way they do if it's opposite you really helps you connect better and be more accepting of people in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, reason and dualistic black and white is really important and really powerful, and we need to live in that to some extent, and we need to allow ourselves to transcend it.
But do we need to live in the black and white?
Say that again?
Do we need to live in the black and white?
I'm not saying we need. I would say that duality and non-duality can coexist.
Yes.
The duality of black and white can exist, and the non-duality that is all the gray can exist. They can coexist. And you're talking about different things in the paradox of things that don't seem compatible coexisting.
And when
And
you're
then
living in the
both
grays,
having some rightness.
and when you're living in the grays, you gotta be careful too. Like you can't just go out and say everything you think because you'll attack people's sacred cows, and people that really don't want to think outside of black and white. It'll trigger them, and it'll make an argument that you really don't need an argument for. So once you start living in the grays, you got to give up the desire to be right or even be heard sometimes, and definitely not just say everything that you think you know, because even if you're not stuck on it, they're going to be stuck on something that they know, and it's going to cause conflict.
And there's different kinds of right, and what's the biggest right? And Michael, I think you would say the biggest right is love, which isn't about right or wrong. Right? Right?
In my experience, there is very, very, very little. I'm not willing to say there's nothing, but there's very, 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 very little that is true that is not paradoxical.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed.
I do agree with where you started, Jen, and it goes back. This so resonates with me and my journey for the last, probably 40 something years. The questions are far more important than the answers. And sometimes I think there are no answers. There's just the questions. And the questions are the answers. But questions to me are just everything.
And that's what, when you can just live in that uncertainty, it starts to illuminate the things you don't know, the edges of your beliefs and everything like that. And there was an author, a German poet, Rainer Maria Rilke. She wrote, live the questions now. Perhaps then someday, far in the future, you will gradually, without ever noticing it, live your way into the answer. That just speaks to that. Holding everything open, being open to review your ideals, and just living in that negative capability and that not need to know.
I mentioned this before, but it is a practice. It is a holy, sacred, spiritual practice to live not knowing. It's active. And it is going to come in conflict with parts of us that want to know the answers, want to know, believe there is a right answer, there's a right way, there's a getting past that is you can get to a place where you don't feel the need to know, and there is so freeing. It's so freeing to be like, oh, remain open, but and I think this is key. It's not passive. It's not. I'm not going to stop asking the questions. I'm going to actively live the mystery, actively seek and question, because those questions are everything. They are the answers. It's not a. You do see certain more nihilistic philosophies, I think, that say they sort of give up and say there is no truth, there is nothing. So why ask? Why seek? Why live this? I think the shadow of that, or that is the shadow of this, which is you ask, you seek, you stay engaged, and that doesn't lead to answers in the traditional sense, but it does give such meaning and richness to life.
I was thinking of the stage of development when, I think it's later infancy and in toddlerhood. So I use this as an example when I'm talking with parents about why it's so important to be consistent when we're teaching our young children or teaching children in general. And there's a stage that I think it's object permanence, where the child has not reached, where they realize that every time I hit this button on that musical toy, it's going to do the same thing. Or where they're playing peekaboo. It's so much fun because every time you drop that blanket or come from behind your hands, it is magic to them. It's a miracle you're here. Or you think of them, when it's raining outside and young children, the delight they have in splashing in puddles. And I think sometimes we lose, if we stop questioning and we don't remain open, we lose that sense of wonder. Like each thunderstorm can be different. And we can get caught up in the lights might go out, or the roads are going to be wet, or the different, our shoes, my new shoes are going to get muddy, or we can be like that young child that it's a puddle, let's see how the water splashes. And I think we can limit ourselves so many ways when we're not open, and when we seek the finite instead of being open to the infinite.
Absolutely. Do you think if you know that how many times you heard someone, especially religious someone, say, that you know it and you know, or you know that you know. Do you think if we know, we are capable of wonder, of surprise? Because I think it's a closed circle. I think it kills wonder. It kills surprise. It kills delight.
Well, the foundational development stage, Ericksonian development stage, is trust or mistrust. And we're talking about, if I have trust within myself, with my caregivers, with goodness, then I am okay with unknown. But to be okay with unknown, there has to be some kind of trust, foundational trust. Because if there's not,
it goes back to the words you said earlier, security.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Being open and being curious is the key to learning yourself and to being in that state of wonder. And one of my favorite books, and the one I lead that group on Monday nights, is based on Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. And it's a channeled book between Neale Donald Walsch and God. And Neale is going on about how this isn't right, this can't be right, because of lived experience. And the line that stuck with me was when God said to him, I can't tell you my truth. I can't tell you the truth until you stop telling me your truth. And that's the thing. You've got to be open and listen to actually learn anything new. And there's always something new to learn. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up here.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much.
And we'll
Great.
see y'all next
Good
time.
discussion.